3 minutes after my stepson slid an envelope across the Christmas table and told me to sign it, nobody was eating anymore. His wife had stopped smiling. My husband looked like someone had knocked the air out of him. And Jason, who'd spent the whole day treating me like a piece of furniture nobody wanted, was about to find out exactly who he was dealing with. I'm Margaret. I'm 64. And that Christmas morning began quietly enough, in a house in Carmel, Indiana, with snow on the roofs and my knee aching, the way it always does in winter now. My husband Richard laid out the camel-colored coat he'd given me for my birthday. Soft, expensive, flattering. "Jason keeps the house cold," he said. "You should wear that one." I looked at my old navy wool coat instead, 15 years old, cuffs worn thin, a replacement button that never quite matched. Retirement had added 12 pounds to me since I last wore it regularly. I reached for it anyway. Richard frowned. "Why that one?" I told him it was warm. That wasn't the whole truth. The truth was, I wanted to know who Jason and his wife Emily became when they thought there was nothing to gain from impressing me. No title, no money, no useful connection. Just an older woman in a tired coat who'd married into their family. Jason had never said anything Richard could call him out on directly. Comments about whether my little pension covered my expenses. A joke to a neighbor that I was enjoying a comfortable retirement thanks to Dad. Little cuts, always deniable. We drove up to Jason's house, the kind of subdivision where every home is built to look bigger than the family inside it. A leased Escalade sat in the driveway with a bow on the hood. Jason hugged his father at the door, then looked at me, at my coat, and said only, "Merry Christmas, Margaret." No hug. Emily appeared behind him in cream and gold, took one look at me, and said, "Oh, Margaret, you should have told me you needed something warmer." My grandson Daniel, 17 and quietly kind, was the only genuine warmth in the house. He took the pie from my hands and moved my chair closer to the fire, without anyone asking him to. The afternoon unfolded in small cuts. Jason showed off photos from Cabo, mentioned twice what the suite cost per night. He raised a bourbon glass and said, "Dad always did have a soft spot for strays." Emily laughed. Richard's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. And that hurt worse than anything Jason said. I remembered the man Richard used to be, the one who'd stop a contractor from bullying a young inspector. Now he just stared at the ice in his glass. I noticed other things too. Mail turned face down near the office, one envelope stamped overdue in red. Emily flinching when Jason mentioned the new kitchen. Jason changing the subject fast when Richard asked whether the Escalade was bought or leased. By dessert, I no longer believed their cruelty came from confidence. It came from fear. Then Jason disappeared into the office and came back with a thick cream envelope. He set it in front of me. "This is just something responsible adults should put in writing." Richard asked what it was. Jason said it protected me. "From what?" Richard asked. Jason just smiled the smile of a man convinced the evening was already won. "Go ahead," he said. "It's nothing personal." I opened it. Family Financial Protection Agreement. Copied from some online template, uneven fonts, clauses that contradicted each other. I'd read thousands of real legal documents in my life. This wasn't one of them. It waived any claim I might have to Richard's assets. Fine. I'd never wanted them. It required me to vacate our home within 30 days if Richard died first. 30 days. After burying my husband, it made me responsible for half of every future repair and medical bill I already paid voluntarily. And buried in the last section, it authorized Jason to assist Richard with financial decisions if Richard became unable or unwilling. "What does that mean?" Richard asked. "It just means I'd help you," Jason said quickly. "I never agreed to that," Richard said. "You said you wanted me involved. I said I wanted you to know where my paperwork was. Not remotely the same thing." I closed the packet. "Words matter," I said. "They matter to lawyers," Jason snapped. "They matter to everyone." Emily stood up too fast, reaching for an expensive electric corkscrew that promptly died in her hand. Daniel silently handed her a regular one from a drawer. "This one always works," he said. Even Richard laughed, just for a second, the tension breaking and reforming in the same breath. Jason tapped the agreement. Are you signing it? No. You didn't even think about it. I thought about it while I was reading it. I don't sign documents from unnamed people over Christmas dinner. Emily crossed her arms. If you've got nothing to hide, why not? The problem isn't what I'm giving up, I said. It's what Richard is giving away. I slid a page toward Jason. Explain this authorization. He hesitated. That's just in case. In case of what? Who decides that? He had no answer. Then I noticed the financial schedule stapled behind the agreement, a business credit line for $185,000, with Richard listed as guarantor. Richard had never seen it in his life. It's only an application, Jason said, too fast. It's nothing. I studied the signature page. Something about the spacing, the date, the scan quality. Nothing I could prove yet, but something. 20 years on the federal bench teaches you that people obsess over signatures, while judges learn to notice everything around them. That's when Daniel stood. I need to show Grandma Margaret something. Jason went rigid. What? Daniel just said, please. I followed him into the laundry room. He closed the door, hands shaking, and told me that a month earlier he'd fixed his father's printer and it had spat out old stuck jobs, a notice of default, an email about a commercial credit line, and a scanned signature page with Richard's name on it. Not the full contract, just the signature. Then another email. My father has approved the guarantee. I'll send the signature page tonight. I didn't know who to trust, Daniel said, and that sentence hurt more than anything Jason had said all day. No 17-year-old should have to wonder which adult is safe. He'd hidden copies inside a chemistry textbook, and he'd brought the originals in his backpack, just in case something happened to his phone. I told him what these documents proved and what they didn't. Suspicion, evidence, and proof are 3 different things, and I wasn't going to let anger get ahead of the facts. He told me the rest, quietly. His parents had been fighting about money for months. The Escalade was leased. The kitchen was financed. Jason kept saying one more promotion would fix everything. And Jason had taken money out of Daniel's college account. Daniel had checked the balance himself, then asked his grandfather about it, and Richard had no idea what he was talking about. I stepped out to call an old colleague, got the name of an elder financial exploitation attorney, and when I hung up, Emily was standing in the laundry doorway, having heard enough to blurt out, I didn't know Jason used your father's signature like that, before she realized what she'd admitted. She wasn't the architect. But she wasn't innocent either. We went back to the table. I laid out the timeline. The signature page dated November 22nd. The guarantee agreement itself not created until December 3rd. Richard had signed something that, on its own terms, didn't exist yet. Jason cracked. You've been poisoning Dad against me since you married him. Then, louder. You live off my father, and still act like you're above us. The room went silent. I answered evenly. I have never accepted $1 from your father. He laughed. Sure. I've never needed to. My retirement income is a little over $27,000 a month. Nobody breathed. Jason blinked. That's impossible. I served as a federal judge before I retired, I said. Richard already knew. Jason rounded on him. You knew. And Richard said quietly, you never asked. Jason had spent years assuming an older woman in an old coat had to be dependent on his father. He'd built an entire grievance on an assumption he'd never bothered to check. He grabbed the folder off the table and turned toward the fireplace, like he might actually throw it in. Daniel stepped between his father and the flames. Go ahead, he said. I scanned every page 2 weeks ago. Jason stared at his own son like he didn't recognize him. Richard stood, held out his hand, not to me, to Jason, and said, quiet but solid, give me my papers. Jason tossed the folder onto the table. There. Happy now? Then it came apart for real. Jason admitted he'd told Richard the papers were emergency contact updates, knowing that if he'd told the truth, Richard would have said no. He admitted he'd lost a major account, that interest rates had climbed, that the remodel cost double the quote, that Daniel's tuition was coming, and that he'd told himself he only needed a few more months to fix it, before anyone noticed. I'd heard that same sentence once before. From a businessman I sentenced years ago, right before his forged authorizations cost dozens of employees their retirements. People rarely plan to become dishonest. They just keep postponing the moment they admit they need help. I was going to protect you, Jason told his father. Richard's voice cracked. You were supposed to protect me before you asked me to sign. Emily, in tears, admitted she'd known things were bad and had chosen not to look too closely because she liked the life they appeared to have. She reached into Jason's jacket, took his keys, and dropped them into my empty coffee cup. You've been drinking all afternoon. If you're leaving angry, you're not driving. Even Richard let out a breath that was almost a laugh. I told them plainly. I was calling an attorney in the morning. Not a favor, not a former colleague who owed me anything, just the right person to protect Richard. Richard backed me without hesitation. Notify the lender. Preserve every document. Freeze Jason's access. I've defended you for years, he told his son. I won't defend deception. That night, driving home through the snow, Richard apologized. I told him I could forgive being insulted. I couldn't live in a marriage where keeping the peace mattered more than protecting each other. He said he understood. I told him I hoped he did. The attorney, Thomas Avery, spent 3 hours with the documents before telling us the good news. Richard had only signed one real page, and the bad news, that page had been attached to a guarantee he was never shown. The lender froze activity on the loan while it investigated. Jason hired his own lawyer. The Escalade disappeared from the driveway. The boat he'd bought that summer went up for sale. The stone entryway that had never been paid for came out. Emily took a full-time job and stopped by our house one afternoon with donuts. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just wanted to stop lying. She and Jason separated a few weeks later, not because of one dinner, but because that dinner had finally exposed years of things nobody had wanted to say out loud. Daniel stayed with us through the rest of the school year. He shoveled snow before I woke up. He carried the groceries because he knew my knee. When I found him rewriting a college essay for the 12th time, trying to sound impressive, I told him to try sounding honest instead. Acceptance letters came from 3 schools that spring. Richard cried before Daniel did. Richard started seeing a counselor. For a while he apologized constantly. Then one day he stopped apologizing and started changing. He quit confusing peace with silence, and when something bothered him, he said so immediately, instead of 6 months later. Walking around the pond one evening, I told him the real reason I'd worn that old coat. He stopped walking. You were testing us. I was. I hate that you felt you needed to. So do I. I'd like another chance, he said. You've been earning it, I told him, and let him take my hand. The next Christmas looked nothing like the last one. We hosted pot roast, mashed potatoes, a pecan pie that finally turned out right on the first try. Emily came. Daniel came home from college for the break. Jason didn't. Instead, Richard got a handwritten letter, admitting he'd let pride matter more than honesty, asking for nothing except the chance to earn trust again someday. Richard folded it and put it in a drawer. He wasn't ready to answer yet. Neither was I. Healing doesn't run on a holiday schedule. That night, Daniel handed me a plain white envelope and grinned. Envelopes make me nervous now, I told him. I promise this one's safer, he said. Inside was a Christmas card with one line under his name. You taught me that quiet people can still do the right thing. People sometimes ask if revealing my old career or my income was the real revenge. It wasn't. The money only corrected a false assumption. The title only explained why I recognized the warning signs before anyone else did. The real victory was simpler than that. I stopped accepting disrespect just because staying quiet was easier for everyone else. Growing older teaches you that dignity isn't something other people hand you, it's something you protect. Even when your voice shakes, and the people across the table share your last name.